All right, so moving right along. In the last video, we looked at how we can link our character to our player, in this case. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a little organized because the way that this is set up right now is probably not the best um, as far as keeping yourself organized with naming and all the rest of it. I don't want to start any bad habits, before they begin. So let's break down these components. So main camera, we'll leave that. That makes sense because that's the camera that's going to follow our character around. Maybe with cube, let's rename it by by right clicking to rename. And I'm going to put player because that makes more sense. Okay. I'm going to move this down because the order here doesn't really matter much. The plane, which is the floor of our game, we're going to rename that to ground. All right, and you can click and then just pause for a second and then you'll be able to rename. So we'll call that ground. And in this case, we're going to call each of these pickups, because what we're going to look at in this particular tutorial is how to create pickups. And so we'll call the cylinder pickup 1. We can call them all pickup. It really doesn't matter, actually. The name doesn't matter. But if we want to be sort of generic here, they can all be pickups. And I'm just copying and pasting so that they're all named the same. All right, so this makes a little more sense. So continuing from where we were, the last thing we did is we set up a camera that now follows our character around because the two are linked together. The player is a parent of the camera itself. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the character back a little bit. Whoops. The player, not the camera. I'm going to move it back a little bit. Sort of about here. And actually I'm going to adjust my camera because I kind of want it at about a 45-degree angle looking at our character here. So I'm just going to move it back. I'm going to set this here to 45. You can do whatever you want. It's up to you. But I'm going to have it following sort of from behind. Not a huge fan of the top-down view. All right, and let's just test that out, make sure everything's still working. And yes, everything works just fine. And we can still interact with the objects, and we can still rotate. Yep, everything's looking really good. Okay, so let's stop that. Now, let's say we want to create objects that our character can pick up. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this. And I'm not saying my method is the best. It's probably not. But I'm going to show you a way that's really quick and easy. A really simple technique that you can use to create pickups in Unity. So pickups could be anything. Pickups could be coins. They could be weapons. They could be items that you need to complete a quest, like a key. It could be whatever you want. All right. And generally speaking, when you pick up an item, you would have some sort of a variable, an integer, or something that's keeping track of what we're picking up. In this case, I'm simply going to show you how to create a pickup. All right. And we'll look at a score or something later on that we can add to this. To create a pickup script is quite simple. We're going to go down into our scripts here, and we're going to right click and create a C# script, and I'm going to call it pickup objects. Okay, so pickup objects. And we're going to go into Visual Studio by double clicking, and we're going to create this script. All right, so it's called pickup objects. Now, in this case, because we are going to apply this script directly to the objects, we can get rid of both the start and update, because this is not a script that's going to run constantly. It is simply going to run when we have some sort of collision between our character and the objects that we are picking up. So how do we detect for that? How do we actually watch for that? Well, within Unity, there's this great thing called tags. Tags are super useful because you can create tags that allows you to watch for interactions between objects. It's the easiest way. You can also use triggers and stuff like that, which we could get into later, but for now, we're going to use tags as our sort of detection on whether we create a collision. So if statement, oops, I don't know where that hashtag came from. If, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I have to actually create the method here that it's going to run from. All right, so let's make it a private method from within this pickup objects class. We're going to use void in this case because the next definer that we're going to put in here does not need to return a value. Okay, so void, so private void. And if you're not sure what that means, if you're not sure what the reason why void is used, you can look that up. And oh, actually, I shouldn't have autocomplete. I should have explained what's going on. We're using on collision enter, which is already included as one of the commands. We are going to put collision, oops, and collision again. Oops, geez, it keeps auto-correcting and I don't want it to. There we go. Okay, so we're creating a method called it's on collision enter, collision. This is a pretty standard script that you can add that will detect for collision between objects. And here's how it works. Inside of this, we're going to create a bracket. We are going to say if collision, whoops, lowercase c, collision dot game object, which is telling it to look for a collision between a game object, compare tag. All right, we're looking for a collision with a game object with a tag named, we got to put it in brackets, player. Okay, so whatever is going to happen to the object that this script is attached to is going to be within this if statement. And we are going to say if a collision is detected, let's just go all out here. Let's destroy the game object. All right. Now, destroy tends to be one that a lot of people remember because it's pretty obvious what it's going to do to that game object. But allow me to explain how this script is running and how it's working. So right now, this object is called pickup. This object. This script is called pickup objects. It's calling a command here that is called on collision enter. Okay, which is part of Unity's package of scripts that it has. And it's called when a collider rigid body has begun touching another rigid body or collider. Okay, so collision. And again, the format of this tells Unity that you want to use this particular command. Inside of there, it is checking if a collision between game object with the tag player occurs. If the collision happens, the game object is destroyed. Now, you don't always want to destroy your game object. When you destroy a game object, what happens is it is wiped from the game completely. So things like a coin or something that doesn't need to be there anymore, can be wiped out completely, and that's not really going to cause a problem. But you would probably want something in here to detect or to be added to a variable that keeps track that you have collected that coin or that object or whatever. In this case, we're just flat out destroying it. Okay? If an object comes back later, you don't want to destroy it. You would hide it. And I can show you that as well. But let's do this first. So let's save this. It's a very simple script. All right, we're going to save this. We're going to close it. And in order for this to work, we need to set this up a certain way. First of all, we need to click our cube, which is our player. The cube that is the object that we are controlling. This is our player. And remember our script that says that we're looking for a tag, a collision between a tag with an object with a tag player. In order to set a tag for an object, you would go up here to the top right and look under tags, and you would look for player. You can also add your own custom ones, but we're going to add a player tag to the cube. All right, so the cube is now defined as the player. Each of these objects are the pickups. And what we need to do is we need to attach the pickup object script to each of those. We could do this one at a time and drag and drop them to each of them, but imagine a game where you got hundreds of pickups and you have to add it. I'm going to show you a quick way to do it. What you can do is in your list here, in your scene, is you can click the first one, you can hold Shift and click the last one, and so now we have all the pickups selected. All right, and because they're named the same and they're ordered together, it makes it much easier. Otherwise, we might have to go through a long list in order to find them all, but in this case, it's only 3. And then with all these 3 selected, you can go over to the right where we would normally add different components and stuff to these objects, and down at the bottom, click Add Component. And if we look for pickup objects, you will see that you can search scripts as well. Okay, so there's pickup objects. That's the one we just created. Attach it. And now each of those objects has that script attached to it. All right, so that's a faster way of attaching scripts and modifying scripts for objects that you have. And now if we play the game, what should happen is our character with his with his box collider, when he touches another object, that object is actually going to get destroyed. And we actually see it disappear from our scene completely. It is gone, all right, because it was destroyed completely. When we stop the game, obviously everything comes back and everything is working again. Let's say, however, that we didn't want to completely destroy the object. Let's say we wanted to change maybe a property of the object itself instead. You will notice inside of each object you have these components. Okay, a mesh renderer and a box collider and a rigid body, all these things that we have in here that we have added or that were already there that are part of this object. If we go into the pickup object and we double click to go back into our script, rather than destroying the game object, what we could do is we could change one of its components. So we can get a component, all right, and in this case, let's say we want to target the renderer. I'm going to show you where that is, by the way. Okay, so renderer. And then we could put 2 brackets, dot enabled equals false. All right. We can also do that for component again. We could do the same thing for the collider so that the collision between this object is no longer detected because the collider is disabled as well. There's a lot you can do by calling components of objects. You could change materials, you can change colliders, you can do all sorts of things to the objects that you come into contact with just by targeting their components specifically. I'm going to save this. I'm going to show you where you can find these. Okay, so once that saves, remember renderer and collider. And if we go back to Unity, we select one of these pickup objects, you will see that these are called renderer and collider. Okay, so when we make contact, if the renderer was turned off, you see this little checkbox, the object would disappear and the collider would disappear. So it would turn them off, but the object itself would not be destroyed. All right, and you'll notice when we test this out, when we look at the list and we make contact with those objects, let me just show you. They disappear, but they don't disappear off of our list. That's because all we've done with our script is turn off their renderer and their collider rather than destroy the object entirely. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. That is pickups and collision with objects and how to detect collision. Again, that's a super useful script that you can use for a lot of things, and you can modify it to make it work for whatever you need. Hopefully stick with us to the next one, because again, we're going to get into some more detailed, more advanced stuff, and we're going to start making this look more like an actual game.